Everybody, welcome back to Video Game Esoterica on our continuing series Unported playlist, where I take a look at some of my favorite unported arcade games of all time. And today we have Demon Front, released on the PGM or Polygame Master System by IGS. And it is basically just a Neo Geo with another name, even if the hardware is slightly different. Before we get too far involved in the game, if you could do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like and subscribe, and ring that notification bell. It definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined to want to support the channel, we have a Patreon link down there as well. But Demon Front is an absolutely outstanding, amazing game. But we have to just talk about the elephant in the room right now. It is an absolute copy and paste job of Metal Slug. This game is identical to Metal Slug in every way, shape, or form, outside of different sprites and backgrounds. And you can definitely say that that's a lazy design decision, and, IGS copied a lot of the Neo Geo games basically verbatim, and we've talked about other, PGM games on the channel before. Copying somebody like SNK is not a bad idea, because if you do even half as good as they do with the games, you're going to have an awesome experience. And I would say this game is as fun, as colorful, as cartoony, and as action-packed as the Metal Slug franchise. So to me, it's just more Metal Slug with a different story and with different characters. So in that respect alone, I absolutely love the game. And it definitely gets hated on online. People say that it is just a clone of Metal Slug, and while I said that's 100% absolutely true, if you're going to clone a game, Metal Slug is a really good blueprint to copy, and that's why I just love this game, and I wish it had been ported over to some home console, because a lot of the PGM games are much less well known than SNK. They were a company that existed, and they made a lot of arcade games, and they had a PGM 2 and even a PGM 3 board as well. But if you talk about IGS versus SNK, pretty much everybody who's interested in gaming knows who SNK is, knows the Neo Geo platform, and has at least played one of the games in arcades. Where ask people whether or not they played a PGM game in arcades, and the answer is probably going to be 90% no. Most people probably haven't even heard of Demon Front if they're really into this genre, and that's what I hope to achieve with this video. Is you should definitely emulate this and play it. You could even go out and buy a PGM board with this cartridge, even a bootleg cartridge, and have it in your collection, because from start to finish, it is so much fun. Now, mechanically, it's quite a simple game, but in that simplicity is all the challenge. You go left, you go right, and you shoot. That is basically the entire mechanics of the game. You will see that we have this little strange-looking bat character following us around, and he's your helper. He can turn into a force field, or he can shoot projectiles out as well, so it's kind of like a secondary attack. But really, the name of this game is Avoid the Projectiles. It kind of feels like Contra in that challenging way, or if, like I said, if you've ever played Metal Slug before, you definitely know how it works. But the simplicity of the controls is matched with the complexity of the bullet patterns. This game can be quite hard, and in some instances, just like Metal Slug, I feel like it can be slightly cheap, but it was an arcade game, and they definitely wanted to get your quarters. But when you're not pumping quarters into the game, even if you get stuck in a hard spot, it's really not going to bother you too much. But I love this game so much because it puts up that challenge. You really want to learn the enemy patterns. When you're playing it well, when things are clicking, when you're in that flow state, it is an awesome game. Now visually, again, it's stunning, and it has the same style artwork that SNK used for the Metal Slug games, but all of these backgrounds, the parallax scrolling in the clouds, all the different sprite work here with that flying ship with those canvas wings on it, there is a ton of detail in the backgrounds. And again, if you're going to copy Metal Slug, copy that level of detail, because those games are so intricately designed. All the artwork was just dripping with little, touches here and there. The fact that they decided to put the same amount of love into something like Demon Front as they would have Metal Slug from SNK, it just is amazing. All the animations are really cartoony. You have these characters here. When they get hit in the head, that guy on the left, he kind of gets knocked out, and there's a ton of frames of animation in the entire thing. So it's just a really fun game to play. It's a really fun game to look at. It's a really fun game to listen to. The soundtrack is also quite awesome. In some instances, I actually like some of the soundtrack tracks in this game more than I do some of the Metal Slugs, which is to say that the best tracks in this game are better than the decent tracks in Metal Slug. But right here is a great example of why this game is just so much fun. You have these shmup-style bullet patterns coming at you, you have enemies coming in from the left and right, and you have to manage so many different elements at once. But when you're playing it really well and you're not taking too many deaths, just like when you're playing a shmup and you get in that zone, it gives you this great sense of satisfaction when you're playing the game. When you're on, and you're having a ton of fun. And when you combine that together with all the different elements that are going on, the backgrounds, the sprites, the animation, the soundtrack, the sound effects, This game is, I would say, as good as a decent Metal Slug game. Now, it's not as good as Metal Slug X, or even 3 in my opinion, but it is so close, and that's kind of a controversial statement because this game kind of gets crapped on a little bit compared to those. But even the bosses are just absolutely awesome. You get this giant sprite work here of Big Claw, and he's clearly some sort of lobster slash crustacean, but he fills up the entire screen, and not only do you have to avoid his projectiles, but you have to keep walking forward and utilizing that space. And you're going to get these different golems coming in, and you do have a punch attack that works very similar to Metal Slug's knife attack, but in this game, you're powering up a heart meter, and you're powering up that death soul meter, which is what I'm calling it. I don't know exactly what they call it traditionally, but you're able to level up, you're able to make a shield for yourself to protect yourself. So it does have a little bit of an extra element of just run and gun and collecting new weapons. They do have that power up, level up system as well, which does give it an extra layer compared to Metal Slug. And that's not to say that it's adding that much to the game, it's just slightly different. What I'll let you do here is just watch a little bit and listen. The soundtrack, like I said, is great. The sound effects are awesome. I'll be back in about a minute. We'll finish up talking about Demon Front, but enjoy Granny here firing off those pistols like she's celebrating somebody's birthday. And we finally destroyed that building, and the game does have sub-bosses in the levels, but they more exist like those pieces of infrastructure where you have to destroy them to progress forward versus having traditional enemies. And we have that squid running around in what looks like a bathtub, and it looks in a way similar to the aliens in Metal Slug. And like I said earlier, you cannot deny that this game is just an absolute rip-off of the Metal Slug franchise, but I don't actually care whatsoever in that respect. That tentacle just slapped me hard there. I love Metal Slug, but SNK doesn't give us that many games in the franchise. It's not like we get one every 2 years. And even back when this game came out, I would have loved to have played it back then in arcades. The only time I've ever seen this is playing a friend's arcade board, and now I'm emulating it. But to have more games like this makes me happy. Now, some people just dismiss this game outright and they just say, oh, it's just a cheap ripoff of Metal Slug. Well, it's not a cheap ripoff, it's just a ripoff, but it has the same love, it has the same attention. These backgrounds here, everything is lush, it's colorful. I do hate this jump. I fell in 3 times before I was finally able to get over it. Kind of a bad design decision. You can die here and there in some unforgiving jumps. But even as we transition to the next boss here, the amount of detail and color in the sprite work in the backgrounds, you get this great depth with that little river, going into the background and receding. And then you have Evil Ice here, this giant half, lobster, half squid, half mechanical, that's 1.5 worth of half enemy. It's just great to look at, and it's a fun boss to fight. So if you are looking for another game like Metal Slug, play this game, download it, emulate it. You can even get, a PGM arcade board, and they aren't that expensive. They're actually relatively cheap compared to a lot of the other arcade boards you can collect for. Now, getting original carts, there's tons of bootlegs running around, but unlike the, MVS scene, people just like buying PGM bootlegs. So you could get this game as a bootleg and a board to play it on for around $150 to $200, and the amount of fun you're going to have with it isn't that bad. Now, it is a cheap game, and I'm glad I'm not pumping quarters into it, because I used 3 continues just to beat this boss, and if you're throwing 50 cents in each continue, you're going to have $1.50 just to get past this stage. But obviously, if you own the arcade board, you're emulating it, you're not spending any money, and then who cares? But that is Demon Front, a total ripoff of Metal Slug, but an awesome game in its own right, and more Metal Slug, even if it is just called a different name, is 100% fine with me. But thanks so much for watching. Leave me any questions or comments below. I'd love to know if you've played this game or if you've ever heard of it before, if you're a fan of Metal Slug. Let me know down below. Short of that, do me a huge favor, hit like and subscribe, ring that notification bell. It takes a lot of time and energy to make these, and we appreciate your support. We'll be back next Sunday with another Unported arcade game. We'll have videos on Tuesday and Friday as well. But as we beat this little stone golem up for his hearts, we hope you enjoyed the video, and we'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.